have your seat. So, audience, we're going to get into the topic in just a moment, the good, the bad, and the ugly of Silicon Valley. But before we do, can I get your help with something? This is the interactive part, guys. You've been sitting for a few minutes, right? So I need your help. We've had two incredible MCs, not just today, but really for this whole Startup Istanbul, and we need you to help us thank Ozan and Amal for all their hard work. So please stand up. Let's get a standing ovation for them, please. Very nice job. Come on up. So you actually understand my tactic was to start the panel with a standing ovation. That's a really good way to make sure that we get some love. We need you to have your energy for this. We've got a topic that I know a lot of people are interested in, and actually we have a panel that has a real diversity in terms of their perspective, and I think you're going to hear several different opinions and some things that I think will really challenge maybe some of what you understand about Silicon Valley and really how to leverage ecosystems in general to move your venture forward. So the first idea here is to really talk about the good. And so before we do that, we've actually got our three panelists have different experience with Silicon Valley and actually with different ecosystems. So I'm going to start with Daniil. How long have you been in Silicon Valley?
Oh, long time, 16, almost 17 years now.
About 17 years. And how about you, Kyra?
I grew up in the area and then came back in 2012 and have been there for the last 4 years.
About 4 years. And then Sam he's traveled there a couple times, but has incredible experience in the Boston ecosystem with HubSpot. So how long have you been in Boston, Sam?
Yeah, so I really love the wine country north of San Francisco, but I don't go to San Francisco that often. I've been in Boston for almost 6 years with HubSpot.
Cool. So what we're going to do, just so you understand the journey we're going to go on in the next 18 or so minutes, it says here 15 minutes, is we're going to talk a little bit about Silicon Valley, some of the good and the bad and the ugly, and then we're going to talk about sort of comparing that to maybe some other more mature ecosystems or similarly mature ecosystems. And then we're going to get into how do you take those examples and do really well in the ecosystem you're in. So let's start with Daniil. So when you think about the good things that you see in Silicon Valley, aware that we have little time, what are, if you were going to sort of truncate that, what are sort of the highlights of the good things you see?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to truncate it because I have a long list I could go on for hours about. I drink the Kool-Aid. I've been there. I haven't moved from Palo Alto since I relocated, so I can go on. But let me simplify it or shortify. If you think about Silicon Valley, it's really a geographical location at the end. You know, they've been talk about it's a way of thinking, mind, all of that. But at the end of the day, it's a geographical location. And the reason I say that is if you look on the map, starting from San Francisco, you have Uber, Twitter, Airbnb, Instacart, all billion-dollar plus companies. Then you come down to Genentech, Oracle, Facebook. You go to Mountain View, Google, then you go down south to Apple in Cupertino. So where else, if you're a startup or technology entrepreneur, where else would you find this sort of combination in a 50-mile square zone of the world's best, right? And if you are an entrepreneur, that's your Disneyland right there. And then you add to that Sand Hill Road, which per capita, it's almost $1 trillion of investable capital sitting on one street that's ready and to be deployed for technology startup companies. So if you combine the opportunities of working with exciting companies like those on the one hand and these billion-dollar funds sitting on one street that are looking for investing in technology companies, it's like a perfect situation if you are a startup entrepreneur.
So it's the density of resources and opportunity, essentially?
Which creates a magnet for the best in the world to come for those regions and then keep building and feeding into the ecosystem.
So, Kyra, what would you add to that in terms of your experience in Silicon Valley? What else would you say is really good?
I would absolutely say that it's the density. That in DC, you have a one-stop shop that is all politics. In LA, it's film. In San Francisco, Bay Area, Silicon Valley, it's tech. Everyone speaks the language. Everyone drinks the Kool-Aid. You have so many people in your network that have deep expertise in the things that you need, and people are really out there to help each other, that it's very easy to get access. There's events every night of the week. It's so rich in this particular thing, and it's so rich, in fact, that you can be in an Uber, and it will be an Uber pool, and people are getting in, and you can meet your next investor who's riding in the same car as you're going to cocktails with your friends in the evening. So that kind of synergy doesn't happen in most places, and because we have so much density, it can in the Bay Area.
Sure. So we're going to get to Sam in just a second, but before we do, we couldn't have the good without the ugly. So, Anil, what really frustrates you about Silicon Valley? What are some opportunities there?
Yeah, so I guess there are some parts of it like any other place. Obviously, and we all know the price of real estate is expensive, and you're fighting for the best talent, so it's very competitive. If you're a startup looking to hire, you have to be ready to pay a higher price, and that keeps going up every time, and equity and all of that. So those are the known ones, but also the quality of life. If you're a young entrepreneur, and we were talking about that earlier, the quality of life, especially in Palo Alto, which is where I am, San Francisco is certainly much better. But if you're and it's very important for people in the audience here to know, if you relocate, and as a single founder, a young single founder, there's not a whole lot of, outside of your work environment, a lot of social opportunities. We were talking about how dating really for early stage founders doesn't exist, and the show Silicon Valley amplifies that, right? So we have a bunch of young, mostly male, single founders in that area in a high stress job like being startup founders who don't have a whole lot of social environment created around them. So I think that in my mind is like the one thing I would look to change.
So if you embrace monastic living, then it may be a good place, though. No, I'm sorry. So Kyra, what would you think? What's a downside?
So it's wildly expensive. I can't imagine moving from this ecosystem to suddenly paying $4,000 a month in rent, and that's just like baseline in San Francisco. It's insane. It's totally insane. It's extremely competitive because it's so dense. There's dozens of people who are trying to do the same thing for the same markets at the same time, and that makes it really tough. It is, even though you're working in a big ecosystem, it can be very lonely because you're pulling such long hours working on one thing that I would totally add that socially it can be very lonely being an entrepreneur in San Francisco.
Sure.
And I would add to the while we are at the bad, I mean, they're also, they're just like I think the analogy with the movie industry, right? They're good producers and directors, and they're really bad ones. In Silicon Valley also we have advisors, very good quality, high quality, but there's a bunch of people who've taken advantage of the opportunities who are not really successful themselves, don't have a whole lot to add. And as a lawyer, I get involved in disentangling my founders from those relationships that may have, once you land in Silicon Valley and the guy comes up and says, I can help you with various things, gets 5% equity, and that happens a lot. So you need to be aware that, before you sign up, look for trusted people that have successfully built businesses. Don't just go with anyone, more salespeople.
Very cool. Well, Sam, we're getting you off the bench, buddy. Okay, so I got to tell you, I have a fair amount of experience in Boston, and I think the city bird is a crane. So there's just a lot of energy going on. They have an innovation district that's burgeoning. They have the largest accelerator in the world and also the largest co-working space in the world, right, in the CIC. Mm-hmm. So Sam, how do you, when you kind of think about Boston, what are some, when you think about the good in that environment and the bad, how do you sort of view those?
Yeah, so the good is obviously phenomenal education, from early education all through the excellent schools that we have at Harvard and MIT. Even just if you want to hire a weekend intern, or if you want to meet somebody, I like to tell the joke about how I was at a Starbucks and I was trying to tell them about the logo, the history, why they took Starbucks coffee off the logo. And then I got a 20-minute soliloquy on the anthropological origins of the siren because she was an undergrad at Harvard. So, it's like just phenomenally intelligent people. That was my favorite thing. When I moved there from Florida, I thought I was a pretty smart person. Almost every person I met was smarter than me. So the education infrastructure is fantastic. The innovation is fantastic. The work ethic and culture is fantastic. So this is where, if you're not familiar with the history of the United States, it was born in large part from the city of Boston. So it's people who have rebelliousness in their nature, challenging the system in their nature, and just, really putting your nose to the grindstone and working hard is baked into the culture for everybody who works there. So I think that's a big reason why we've seen the resurgence of the city, right? So it went through a pretty dark period, and it's really sort of come back.
It's really been the last sort of 8 even 5 years where it's just on an incredible trajectory.
Absolutely. For the bad side, I will say that in one of the great ironies of our time, like we were talking earlier, VCs, so the venture capitalists, even though they might be investing in a startup whose job is trying to solve the lack of connectivity, between people all over the world, they're still pretty unlikely to invest in companies that aren't, as Anil says, a bike ride away from their office. Capital is what makes this ecosystem work. So attracting more good, smart capital. And then the other thing is the way the capital is used. Out west, I feel like they're pretty worried about missing the next Twitter. Missing the next, not just unicorn, but massive unicorn. Whereas in the Northeast, to use a baseball metaphor, they hit a lot of home runs. We hit a lot of ground doubles. That's sort of what we go for. And so the way the capital is used and the amount of capital is definitely makes it difficult because you're competing with incredibly smart people for a smaller pool of resources.
So in the next few minutes, let's shift our focus over to, so what lessons, because there's some significant lessons that we've talked about here, can the entrepreneurs in the audience leverage wherever they are? So what are some things, sort of when you move into a new ecosystem or when you're in one that will help you advantage what's available? I'll open it, and again, so audience, just so you know, we have a rule with the panel. The third one to answer a question will buy the whole audience a beer. So we're limiting it to 2 responses on any given question. So there's a method to the madness here. So does anyone want to hop in on that? What are maybe 1 or 2 things that an entrepreneur would want to make sure they do to really leverage their local ecosystem?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing that I might suggest is that there's this huge kind of like electrical grid of all of these events. And to add on to what you were saying, the talent also in the San Francisco Bay Area is phenomenal. We have Stanford, we have Berkeley, we have a lot of world-class talent. And so many people want to share that talent. And so going to events and meeting people is a great way to do that. But the thing that I'd suggest is that the best way to get to know someone is to offer to help them. So that gives you a space to have that conversation and see how you can help, and you have more social credibility when you come back later and ask for something. It's really just about how much you can give the ecosystem, and the ecosystem will give back to you in the end.
So connecting, networking, and helping someone else first before expecting any help. And probably your help isn't necessarily going to come from the person you helped. It's about building.
And if I could add one thing, even if you're not moving to the San Francisco Bay Area, the ecosystem is so beautifully emerging here with ETM and Startup Turkey and Startup Istanbul. These are really lessons that you can use as you meet each other and support each other and meet with the mentors and the advisors and the speakers. No one does this alone. Everyone does this together, and it's really important that that's actually the mentality of Silicon Valley. So you can take that home today.
And I'm going to make it Anil by the beer here by jumping in.
I love it. This is good.
So the other thing that I want to encourage you, and it depends on where you're from, it depends on your background, also depends on who you are as a person. It probably doesn't seem like it because I'm speaking on stage and I'm on a panel and I'm doing all this networking. I'm incredibly introverted. I'm going to have to go sit in my hotel room for 6 hours after this and just be alone.
Me too.
We were talking during one of the mentor sessions to one of the startup CEOs, and he, very smart, nice, interesting thing, but it wasn't a great presentation. And he's, well, I'm an engineer. The job you're signing up for right now, as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's in an early stage startup where everybody's job is to sell, everybody's job is to look for networking opportunities, networking is intentional. This is something you have to make yourself go do. There's a science to it. There's a methodology to it. And especially when you're in a new area where you don't have a support network, you can't rely on the fact that all these opportunities are going to come to you. You have to go make these opportunities. And that can be very difficult, just as it might be difficult to get up and give a presentation in front of a bunch of investors. But that's the job you guys are signing up for. So when you're moving to a new area, not only, especially if you're moving to someplace like Silicon Valley where there's just this dearth, there's so many events. I can imagine it's hard to choose which ones you want to go to. There's so many events. You have to be methodical and treat it like it's part of your job because it is.
So, Anil, I heard a speaker say once that proof that entrepreneurship was difficult is that it's hard to spell, right? Just the idea that we now know it's hard to do because it's simply hard to spell. So, as you think about, again, these sort of lessons learned, if you were going to give advice to a young entrepreneur in a startup, what would be sort of a key piece as they build their venture?
Can I still answer the previous question? No.
Sure,
No,
absolutely. I'm
just going back.
thirsty.
So I think, and I see a lot of entrepreneurs, I would say get out and build it. And you'll hear that, right? The minimum viable product and ship, right? A lot of smart engineers, to Sam's point earlier, that I see in India and other parts of the world outside of Silicon Valley, for example, because they're engineers and have been around other engineers in their professional lives, they keep focusing on the technology, and they're spending time over and over again trying to better the technology. At some point, you have to get it out, let the users use it, try it, get feedback. As you were saying, as has been said earlier, fail fast. Get feedback fast. That's whether you fail or not, but learn and adapt and sort of move on. Your job is to move the needle from where you are to a better version of the product, and sort of not to have the best technology better than your classmates from your technology school. So build and ship it out. Time for getting it done, it's enough talking, get it done, go out.
Cool. So we have about 1 minute and 20 seconds left. It's going to be final thought, and I allow all three on this particular one to answer. So let's start with you, Sam. Final thought on really how to maximize getting your venture going wherever you are. How do we succeed in place?
The key is solve for your customer, right? So what's blown my mind and why I love coming to these conferences, particularly here in Istanbul, is there are problems that are unique to Indonesia that don't exist in Egypt, that are completely different from the same problems in Bucharest, that are completely different from just the way people in Silicon Valley think. You guys have an opportunity to deliver value for your customers. And I know that it might be tempting to look at models of success and say, I really need to replicate all of those, those things that they did. But at the end of the day, especially in this modern era where so much information is available to the consumer, it's the person who delivers that value the best. So focus on the customer, and then you can focus on the business growth.
Okay, so the customer. Kyra, what's one thing you want to make sure they know?
So I agree, build, take care of your customers, be lean, pivot, iterate. But the thing that I think nobody else is going to tell you is that you need to take care of yourself. Entrepreneurship is one of the hardest jobs in the world. It can be incredibly lonely. Often you can't really share the scale of the problems that you're facing, and so taking care of your mental health by exercising, staying connected to your friends and family, eating good foods, getting enough rest when you can, it's the most important thing that you can do to invest in yourself, so that it really is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and you need to be able to run it. So that's a really important ingredient.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Anil, bring us home. What's one thing we want to make sure the audience has?
Sure, but yes, I agree with that absolutely. And please sleep for at least 6 hours. Your body needs that to be productive going forward. I get calls from my founder clients in India, and I look at my watch, it's 3 o'clock in the evening in California. I'm like, dude, what time? It's 3:30 a.m. in the morning. Go to sleep. Nothing's going to change overnight, right? Relax. It's only a startup. You know technology. Keep building, getting it out. You'll be successful. The last point I would make, and I drink from the Kool-Aid, I'll say it as much as you want to fight me, Sam, or others. Come to Silicon Valley. If you're a startup and you're looking to be a global product, now to Sam's point, if you are tender for Turkey, stay in Turkey. There are cultural aspects of building that product that you need to be aware of. But otherwise, come to Silicon Valley. And I'll put my money where my mouth is. Real estate is expensive, but I've chosen to pay that rent for the last 16 years because I see the value of being able to work with the smartest people there. And it works, right? So, and the other example, we talk about Boston. The one startup that we've all heard that came out from Harvard is Facebook. And guess where they had to relocate to get their money? Silicon Valley. So if you want to be that Facebook or the next big hit, unless you're a tender for Turkey or a similar product, come to Silicon Valley.
This message has been sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce of Silicon Valley. No, kidding.
So
thank you all very much for your attention. Please help me thank our panel. You can stand up again. They were great.